Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Needs Some Introduction. In today's episode, Darren and I will be breaking down the season finale, the 10th episode of The Day of the Jackal, the Sky Peacock co-production. Also, I'll be providing a very brief review of the very entertaining location set thriller Carry On, which has shot straight to number 1 on the Netflix list. A Christmas set, tense but often corny, intentionally so, somewhat tongue-in-cheek thriller, very much in the line of Die Hard, for example, but maybe even more so Die Hard 2, which also takes place in an airport at Christmas time. Before we get to all of that, some show notes. We continue to cover The Agency here on the podcast. Sona and I just recapped episode number 4, which you can find here in the feed. Also, if you're listening to this in the US, most of our listeners are in the US. Just to be clear, this is the 10th episode of The Day of the Jackal, the season finale, which is not available in the US on Peacock until Thursday. However, has been available around the world since last Thursday. Not sure why they staggered this by a week. I guess there's some deal they had with the Sky release window. So I do recommend, if you are watching in the US or watching this on Peacock, you should not spoil yourself. And if by chance you are here because you are watching in the US and you're looking for coverage of episode 9, that is already currently in our feed, feel free to search for it. It's just 2 episodes back. I have quite some complaints about this particular final episode. However, this is not one of those episodes or one of those seasons that ends purely on a cliffhanger, all set up for season 2. There are really consequential events here, so do not spoil yourself on it if you have been watching up through this point. But of course, feel free to listen to the Carry On mini review, and then of course pause before we get into spoilers for this episode of television. Just a few more notes. If there's anything you'd like to draw attention to, maybe a TV series you feel got a bum rap or we didn't cover here on the podcast that you want to shout out to other listeners, please do email us, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com, with any of your best of lists. If you want to share your top 10 or just shout out a particular title, maybe an international title that you'd like to expose to a broader audience. I have many blind spots when it comes to watching TV around the world, and of course for movies as well. And I'll include them on an episode in the future, a year-end best of episode. Or record a voice memo and attach it to an email. Once again, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com, or just check the show notes for a link to our email. Now, the movie Carry On, available on Netflix, long and short of it, is an entertaining and pretty silly Die Hard in A type action thriller, which is a genre in and of itself. Written by an upcoming writer, TJ Fixman, who apparently has a Knight Rider remake on the way, but more notably directed by Jaume Collet-Serra, who has directed such trashy but entertaining films such as Orphan, The Shallows, the Shark Attack Blake Lively thriller, quite a few Liam Neeson action films of varying quality, Unknown, Run All Night, Nonstop, and The Commuter. There's a string of movies there where they were almost exclusively working with each other. Oh, and I forgot to mention House of Wax, I believe one of his first English language films. All bad good movies, or good bad movies in my estimation. Recently has been caught up making some pretty bloated and not very interesting blockbusters. The mega budgeted Jungle Cruise that came out during the pandemic, and Black Adam, the failed DC franchise starter. And now working at a much smaller scale, this film seems to be very modestly budgeted, Carry On, which stars Taron Egerton as a TSA agent who, interestingly, is kind of a failed athlete, someone who probably feels like his life has peaked early. He's in love with his fiancée, Nora, who he just discovers is pregnant now, and he kind of wants to make good. He's been a bit of a slacker. He's been unmotivated, maybe not taking his job too seriously. And at the very moment that he wants to finally take the next step, he, by chance, as part of this, ends up working the bag screening on Christmas Eve, the busiest day of the year for travel. I think it's claims to be. I don't know if that's actually true or not. And what a bad coincidence, because apparently the person he's replacing had been targeted by some terrorists, and they want to get this Carry-On through the TSA screening. The first half of this movie is really solid. When it is primarily operating as a straight-faced thriller, it works very, very well. The villain here turns out to be Jason Bateman, which is spoiled in the trailer, so I don't feel that bad announcing it here. But if you see the movie, you realize that that is supposed to be a secret for perhaps the first 15 minutes of the movie or so. We see him backlit. He's quite ominous. I think Bateman does a really good job of playing villain here. He's done this before in The Gift, just to name one, and probably Ozark, another version of a villain, although one that probably doesn't see himself in that way. But the dynamic between Egerton and Bateman is very interesting as he's coaching him through this earpiece, and in some ways is really trying to make him a better version of himself. He's like, you have not tried hard enough. Here's your opportunity to rise to the challenge. So it's an interesting dynamic. At some point early on, I was almost hoping that they would have to team up with each other because this coaching that was occurring was such a unique dynamic in this particular case. Maybe not that unique, actually, because I actually have a couple recommendations that are in the vein of this film. I'll save that for a little later. And so much of this film is just him talking to him through that earpiece, which would seem boring, but it's actually not. And Egerton does a pretty good job of showing you how he tries to do the smart thing, tries to signal other people, and how that continuously gets thwarted over the course of this 2-hour film. And if this seems like 2 hours is probably too long to sustain this material, it is a little too long. And of course, inevitably, the film needs to expand, bring in more characters and more outside of this isolated situation to allow this 2-hour runtime, which honestly is unnecessary. At an hour and a half, this film would have been a real banger, I think. Just completely focused on this cat and mouse between these two characters. As it is, it still works. It's still entertaining. And as a matter of fact, over the course of that second half of the film, you start seeing comedy gets thrown in here. There's some action sequences that are kind of silly, intentionally so, definitely leaning into the silliest aspects of the plot. There is a better version of the film that takes itself a little more seriously. But nonetheless, this is fun. Your mileage may vary on that, but especially that first half, a fun Christmas-themed action thriller. Egerton is a little bit weaker in the scenes that are trying to sell his psychological discomfort with everything that's going on. But physically, racing through the airport, for example, he is very convincing as a former athlete who's a little smarter than everybody expects. Aside from the two leads, everyone else is pretty much underutilized. Sophia Carson as the girlfriend, who does get a few moments to shine of her own, but Danielle Deadwyler as an agent, Theo Rossi, who just appeared in The Penguin, one of those guys, you've seen him play villains many times before, Logan Marshall Green, and Dean Norris from Breaking Bad. I feel they must have been paid pretty well because they get very underutilized here, surprisingly underutilization from these actors. So yeah, my Letterboxd review for this was dumb/fun. So it is dumb, it is fun. And especially if you like these type of diehard-like films, this is one of the better ones that we've seen recently. Okay, if you really like this film and you want something that is even more rigidly committed to the bit, this is a guilty pleasure. This is not a good film, but it is very entertaining, to me anyway. So mileage may vary once again, but we have Elijah Wood, who's giving a piano recital, and John Cusack, unseen throughout this entire film, is talking to him through an earpiece, and Elijah Wood must complete this impossible piano concerto or be killed on the spot. And similarly to what we see in Carry On, he's trying to raise an alarm. He is trying to get himself out of this situation. And as dumb as this premise is, and boy, is it a dumb premise, this is a lot of fun. It is really thrilling. Elijah Wood with those giant eyes really sells the terror of his circumstance. And it resolves itself pretty cleverly. By the way, this movie was written by Damien Chazelle. That's right, Academy Award-winning director of La La Land and Whiplash. Early in his career, writing this really trashy, silly thriller. But man, is this a fun movie. Don't take it seriously for a second. It is so much fun. So if you haven't seen it, do check it out. And this is available to stream on Hoopla and Canopy. I've recommended these streaming platforms before. They're free as long as you have a library card. So once again, Hoopla and Canopy, just a great resource to have. There's so much content on there that you normally pay subscription for. You could just watch it for free there. Please take advantage of your library cards. This is in the US. I don't know how this works overseas. But Grand Piano, a lot of fun, very silly. So we started with a movie that mostly takes place sitting at a chair, screening luggage, but then expands from there to a movie where someone is playing piano in front of an audience, but most of it is sitting at his piano. Let's limit it even more, folks. The next recommendation is the movie Phone Booth with Colin Farrell. This one from 2002, so we're now going over 20 years in the past. And this one is available to stream on Hulu or Disney with Hulu. And this is directed by Joel Schumacher and written by Larry Cohen, the writer and director of such trashy classics as The Stuff and the It's Alive movies. And Colin Farrell picks up a phone, and on the other end of the line is Kiefer Sutherland, once again unseen throughout the film. definitely an inspiration. You see that thematically an inspiration here for this unseen antagonist across all three of these films. And this film very much is the psychopath coaching our protagonist through this situation. And this film, an extremely tight, 80 minutes long, and really couldn't maintain this premise any longer than that. But if you want to see a young Colin Farrell really being put through the psychological ringer by this tormentor on the phone, and maybe escaping from this situation a better man, also thematically linking all three of these films, check this one out. As I mentioned, it's available on Hulu, easy enough to watch, and incredibly short, as is Grand Piano. So make it a 3-movie film festival for yourself. Okay, with that all out of the way, let's jump into that conversation with Darren. Once again, if you cannot watch episode 10, have not watched episode 10 of Day of the Jackal, do watch that first before continuing the episode. And I have a couple things to say before we get into that conversation. So once again, if you don't want to get spoiled, drop off now. I have some pretty negative things to say about this episode, and I just want to set it in some context here. I think that I would probably have been more forgiving of some of the silly things that happen in this episode. Some of it is just the logistics of an action sequence. Like he's trying to escape, and we don't see how he escapes. That would have happened either way, probably would have bumped me the wrong way regardless. But another thing that really irritated me in this particular episode is how he escapes detection from this manhunt, and how it seems like people aren't really looking for the Jackal anymore over the course of this episode. And I want to set it in the context that I literally live just a few miles away from where that CEO was gunned down in New York City. The media coverage here from hour to hour was we have another photograph, we have a GPS coordinate, there are active Reddit boards, people theorizing, and a lot of the things that broke on mainstream media were breaking instantaneously around here, is what I'm trying to say. So I find it completely insane watching this in like literally simultaneously as the story is unfolding, watching the last 2 episodes of this show. And I can't imagine that part of my negative reaction to these 2 episodes, seeing the real world ramifications of this and how inescapable, like within days, this person was tracked down. Every moment, reviewing even low-grade camera footage from actual shops on the streets, they were able to track down not only where this person went, but able to retroactively see all his movements for 10 days. And now I'm watching The Jackal, where he's the most famous person in the world at that point, pulling off these assassinations and suspected of being an assassin that we've already seen pull off another incredible assassination at the beginning of the season. And yet it seems like the police agencies in general, not that interested in pursuing him or tracking him down when they have a lot of evidence leading to him. So just to set that expectation, I have some complimentary things to say as well. Darren liked this more than I did. I have some very negative things to say, but I just want to set that context. I'm not just bashing the show. It's very hard for me to separate out the way the manhunt occurs in this show is even more ridiculous when you hold it up to a real world situation. So I'm just explaining myself a little bit. Okay, here comes the conversation. I hope you enjoyed it right after a short break. All right, Darren, here it is, the season finale of The Day of the Jackal. Funny that this was only announced later on with the rating success, that this was going to be a season 2, because it really feels like, I mean, this would have to have a season 2, don't you think? The way it's set up?
Yeah, it is. But I quite like the finality of it. Finality? What's that word? Yeah, where do we start? Do we begin at the end?
You know what? I want to kind of walk through it a little bit. So it's because I have so many questions. I'm going to definitely have nitpicks. I will bite my tongue as best I can as I walk through this plot.
Well, look, bring on season 2, because one of the best parts of season 1 was his revenge killing to get the money, to get paid or to not get paid. So I like this revenge idea, and Charles Dance being the ultimate victim of this revenge plot. Bring it on.
Yeah, I mean, just in a nutshell, I absolutely agree. I have many, many issues with the writing in the last 2 episodes specifically, to the point of like a setup for a second season. What I have been wanting to get to in this story period was this revenge on this conglomerate, which of course is going to end up stabbing everybody in the back. And that I can be 100% unambiguously on board with watching the Jackal do that. So I've been waiting for this moment. Unfortunately, as usually is the case nowadays, we have to wait for season 2 for that. But yeah, I think it's a great setup for another season. Yeah, so when we last saw the Jackal, obviously he was being hotly pursued by those speedboats. And, you know, I had issues with the way last episode wrapped up, and we spent a few minutes at the end of the episode speculating on how is he going to make this escape. And I have to say, honestly, what I like about these spy shows, what I like about even more so like heist movies, is seeing that proficiency of somebody getting out of a situation in a way I wouldn't have even suspected. Like, for example, the way that he laid in wait for days to make his shot. Like, I like, that's what I watch these shows for. So, I mean, I'm sorry, the fact that they yada his escape, he's just in a car. How did any of that happen? How did you feel about that?
We were so excited about what was going to happen with his boat.
Yes.
And to completely
ignore
it completely. I mean, fair enough. We put him straight into a car.
Yes.
And it was a pretty cool car chase. Yeah. Quite unlike anything else in the series. I don't really remember another car chase like that. And that was pretty cool, the way he was doing donuts, getting away from the spikes. But I really wanted the boat chase.
Exactly. I thought that the race through, I guess he's off the Croatian coast. I don't know exactly the locale he's at. You know, I thought that was a lot of fun. I wrote down that it was like a light version of what we see in like a Mission Impossible movie, for example, right? Each one of them seems to have these huge car chases through these European cities. And this is like a lighter version of that. But fun, really well done. I thought the action in general is always really well done. I have more issues with the way they move from one action sequence to the next. And this is a perfect example of it. Like, they just hand wave away his escape by boat. I'm like, and then how did he get in this car? And like, when he docks the boat, like, how did he get, I mean, nobody intercepted him on the way to the car. So many questions.
Wasn't happy. I was not happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wanted to see it and we didn't see it. Why?
Exactly. Why not? Exactly. Just come up with something, anything. It just, whatever. The boats crash or run out of fuel or whatever. He has some kind of magic device that scrambles their radar. Anything. Just come up with something. Give me a bone.
I'm sure car chases are much cheaper to shoot.
Yes.
And to block than a boat chase, but just something getting off. Getting off that boat. Come on.
I have a theory. I mean, well, I'll tease it here, but I wonder if there were issues potentially with the writer's strike and with other issues that maybe they needed to rush these episodes because it doesn't feel as polished as some of the other ones. And maybe also shooting on location and budgetary constraints. Who knows? I mean, that is expensive, right? Like, doing a boat chase is not cheap. So
huge. Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, so not happy with the hand wave. He is being pursued by a helicopter too, which is another kind of hand wavy thing that somehow he, obviously gets away from the only 4 police officers in Croatia, but the helicopter somehow loses him as well, which is yet another kind of weird detail.
It was gone. Yeah, how do you lose a helicopter in one of those towns? I don't know.
But then away from this chase, which was still very proficiently done, definitely, and beautifully photographed in these cities. I do always like, once again, I like these spy shows to see exotic locales. It's always a real pleasure. He does escape after escaping that roadblock. And River, as we mentioned, as we speculated last week, did not go live. That's turned out to be a red herring, like you mentioned.
Yeah, just gone straight away. That just one little press conference of his partner, who obviously my theory was wrong, that he was the real deal, he was the brains. No, that's gone. River's disappeared,
which was a little, once again, it feels like they're really wrapping things up. I don't know, maybe this was a longer season and they did have to truncate it. I could leave some of that speculation for later. It does feel like some of these things are just kind of like just check marks, like, okay, get that done, get that done, get that done. I'm like, okay, well, we'll see.
Yeah. There was something on the television as well about protests, about River and about the death of UDC, which I thought could have been quite interesting, but it really was just waved away. Just, that's on the TV. Oh, yeah, whatever.
I'm glad that they acknowledged it, at least, considering that we did see that there was kind of a social movement around this technology. Maybe they're planting a seed that this thing's not quite dead. They might just be leaving it open so that they could bring it back as a possible threat in season 2. That's what I'm assuming. Not that we'll see it, but usually when you're doing a new season of TV, you haven't actually planned it out. So like, well, we're going to leave as many options as we have available. So maybe it will come back in some way.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
And, Charles Dance is very happy about how things have turned out. He's talking to this, the
The foreign secretary.
Foreign secretary, right?
Mm.
And of course, they're like, "Oh, everything worked out the way we planned." They made it sound like this was all part of the plan. It's just they kind of got lucky, and a lot of strange things happen for this to actually fall into place. But now it's time to clean up after themselves, and of course, that includes getting rid of Xena and getting rid of the Jackal.
Yeah, did Charles Dance not learn anything from that whole thing at the start of the season with the Jackal staying in the city to get his revenge? I mean, come on. He was so upset about that. He was like, this is not what we're paying for. And now he's not going to pay him. And he's going to be the victim.
But worse than that, to that point directly, he kept him on the job. He's like, "Oh, he's just a wild card. Oh no, wait a second. He has principles. He got ripped off, and that's why he's cleaning up after himself." It's like, and now you're not going to pay him? Like, do you remember what happened last time?
That's exactly right. He did say something about principles. Oh, I like this guy. This guy's got the morals. He's going to follow through. And now,
if you're doing the same thing that happened last time, remember how that turned out, buddy? Remember?
Silly. Okay. All right.
Yeah. I guess they really didn't have the money to make the payment, I guess. So they were talking about that earlier. So he really didn't have the money. Although their stock price is like a new peak at the end of the story, the headline. On this.
Yep. Okay. And Xenia that's his friend, is it? The offsider.
Yeah, and she's they're going to get rid of her too.
Yeah, well, it looks like I don't want to jump to the end, but it looks like she might have a lot more to do in the next series.
Honestly think they have more chemistry with each other than he had with his wife. So maybe that'll be maybe that's teasing something we'll see next season.
Yeah, okay. Both with their new looks.
Yeah, exactly. He talks to her on the phone, so she gets a couple of phone conversations. And going back to your observation last week that she gets her contractually obligated scene. She's on the phone for a couple of scenes, and then she'll have like an actual scene later on. So we get both things here.
We do, yeah, a little bit more of her, which is good.
Yeah, I agree. I like her. And they haven't used enough of her. So speaking the fact that you might be casting for next season, because she was probably underutilized here for sure.
Yeah, and I like that she's a bit evil, but she's a bit friendly as well. So yeah, they could go anywhere with her. And she seems like she's a lot more powerful than you think.
I mean, these are pretty monstrous people when you think about how, in some ways, she's more monstrous than even the Jackal because of how calculated these decisions have been. But but yeah, we kind of like these people. What can you do? And I guess that's the point of the show, right?
That's right.
Bianca, of course, makes the case back in the office that the Spanish case is obviously related. But of course, Isabella's blowing this all off because we find out over the course of this episode that if anybody's the mole here, or if we were trying to identify it, it almost certainly is her because she knows exactly what's been going on. And she wants to get her off the case. And she gets quit. She quits. Bianca quits before she gets fired. So I find that dialogue was very funny too, where she's like, "Don't you dare say those words that I'm fired. I quit." She just wanted to quit before the words were spoken.
Yeah, like we haven't seen that type of thing before, but that's okay. Exactly. And as she walks out, she bumps into the foreign secretary coming in.
Right.
And so there's going to be a flip-flop here.
I got to tell you, I don't understand the purpose of the scene where she quits. Once again, I feel like this was multiple episodes that were consolidated due to some logistical issues. And there's been a lot of them, right? Like, I don't know if you watched, did you watch House of the Dragon?
No, I gave that one a miss.
Yeah. Well, I did like season 1. Season 2 eventually kind of started clicking. But if you've seen that, the whole thing is building up to a big war. And people were very disappointed in the fact that everybody's heading out to war in the season finale, quote unquote. And then after the fact, it turned out that there were 3 more episodes that because of the writer's strike, they simply didn't get to shoot. And they had a production date. So they're like, well, we can finish this one. They put on like an extra 15 minutes and now they're off to war. And I'm like, that's what we've been building up to this whole season. That's not a season. That's just a teaser for a season, right? And I feel like maybe something like that happened where, maybe they needed to shoot 3 more episodes and then they were delayed by the writer's strike. So then they're like, okay, to make our release date, we can make 1 more episode because this is just another potential issue where we have her quit and then Whitlock walks in a minute later and she's like, oh, I shouldn't have fired her. Let me get her on the phone and hire her back. Did we need the quitting scene? That could have all happened in one scene.
Really awkward. I agree. I mean, yeah, she walks out of the building and then the next
Yeah.
meeting inside the office, oh, we need her back in.
Yep.
And then a couple of scenes later, the head lady, Isabel, is that she's at
At her
Bianca's
house.
house. I mean, it was really awkward. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Get her back on the case. Shouldn't have quit from the start.
Exactly. Why even have the other scene? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, you want to see them butt heads? They can butt heads even as she's giving her the mission, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. We all know that Bianca is going to Spain. Let's get her there.
Exactly. And of course, Whitlock in that conversation is saying, hey, let's kill two birds with one stone. We'll send her after Jackal and she'll get rid of Jackal. And then we'll have some cleanup crew to get rid of her after the fact. Easy peasy.
That makes sense. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Why not?
Once again, they could have had that conversation before the quitting scene and cut out the quitting scene completely, and the episode is no different. Just letting you know. They could just do like an insert shot where she quits over the phone or something, and then she shows up at her house and says, we really need you to do this. We don't need to see it at all.
That's right. This episode was, I think, maybe 5 or 10 minutes longer than the others. So,
yes,
finales often are a little bit longer, maybe squeezing a little bit of these things in. I did like the foreign secretary. He's just so unlikable. His the posh accent and just the way that he sits back and makes himself comfortable, and the way that he said, do I need to spell it out? Like, it was just so good.
There's a joke I don't even get because I don't know this playwright, but I like when Bianca meets him for the first time and she says, enjoy your play. And he's like, it's blah, blah, blah. I can't possibly enjoy the.
Of course I'm not going to enjoy it. Yeah.
Exactly. Nuria's dealing with her brother again. This guy's such a pain in the ass, but I guess we don't have to worry about him anymore. He obviously knows that Charles is the assassin. She's like cutting him out. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I don't want to talk to mom anymore. But she seems to still be sticking by Charles, which is bizarre. Although that's another thing that seems repetitive here. And once again, maybe this was supposed to be multiple episodes. She's kicking her family out. I don't want to talk to any of you anymore, meaning that she's picking Charles in this case. And then later on, she's wandering out of the house being like, I never want to see you again. And I'm like, I'm not sure that part of the story is in the show.
Yeah, we just needed to get rid of her before the final kind of showdown, didn't we? So, yeah, I agree. Not ideal, and very rushed. But I mean, we were talking that she's so on the fence with this Charles character. I mean, she's kind of sticking with him, but she's still subconsciously planning her exit. And I think it made it easier that she's just like, well, if I'm planning my exit, I've got to get rid of mum and get rid of brother as well. And I just got to go with my son.
I buy the motivation. I buy that she's cutting ties with her family. I buy that she's obviously torn with Charles. I buy all of that. I just don't, once again, I just feel like maybe it was rushing or maybe they truncated the season or something. I just feel like the scene where that transformation occurs isn't there. And like just that one scene where he's crying on the phone to her. It seems like, I mean, honestly, I read that as her being like, you pussy. I thought you were a real assassin. Like you could read that in kind of a calculated way, which I don't think is the case, obviously. I think that she's thinking, I have to think about my kid. I think she's making a revelation. This is later in the episode, obviously. She's making a revelation that he's not really out of this. We're never going to be clear of this. Even if he doesn't do another assassination, we're going to be on the run all the time. And I think she's making all those calculations. I just think we needed to see a little bit more of that. But the rationale is there for sure.
He was a bit pathetic, though.
He really was
on the phone. Sorry, but I mean, she had a line. What was it? She said, "Oh, if we're not in trouble, why do we need to leave?"
Right.
Which is very clever, of course. His crying scene. I mean, that came after one of my favorite scenes of the whole series with the elderly couple. I mean, I love that scenario.
Yes. Yeah, let's talk about it actually. So yeah, he
has a car crash. His first car crash.
Right. One of two, right. The helicopter's lost him. He has a smashed windshield, but apparently he's gotten away. He at least has the morality or instinct, at least, his morality kicks in for an instant, doesn't run the kid over in the middle of the street and crashes the car. And then I love him like pulling the giant gun out of the car when the truck comes and helps him out. He's just, I got to take this with me. Meanwhile, by the way, the mother's on the veranda snapping pictures of him. Like, aren't these pictures going to circulate everywhere? Anyway, he somehow gets away. He takes the truck. He blows it up. He like leaves an explosion everywhere he goes. You could just follow the explosions to track him down. But then he does get, all this kind of, honestly, for me, just bizarre plotting and a lot of convenient hand waving. It does get to the really interesting scene where he's in the woods. He runs into this family. He relates to them. He says, "You remind me of my parents." At one point, the dad has a great scene with him going like, "What were your parents like?" And he says, "Oh, they were great, decent people." And he's like, "I don't really buy that because look how you turned out." So there's kind of like a come to Jesus moment there for the Jackal.
Yeah, incredible. I love the car crash, even though the car crash just happens out of the blue. Okay, he gets out of it somehow again, and I really liked his when he pushed the truck into that giant hole or that quarry, and he let out this huge yell. I thought that was really cool, and just when he's with the elderly couple in their camper van, and it's just the tension is just so amazing. And when is he going to reveal himself that actually this is kind of a kidnapping? And the way that they talk to each other and just that tension just builds and builds slowly. I thought that was my favorite part of this episode. And I just love the way that the Jackal tries to befriend people, but he just cannot. He can't get on the level, even though he thinks he is. I mean, that the elderly dad or the grandpa or whoever he was never, he thought he was doing the right thing, but he was never on the level with the Jackal. He knew that he was shifty.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to where I think the show made a bit of a mistake in having him have this family, and maybe they got a little too clever in their adaptation of the story, because I think once again, my bias towards the original material, I like the idea that this person just seems to be completely cold-blooded, but then there are flashes that he is a human being and that he feels bad about what he's doing, but it's so ambiguous. We don't actually see him crying on the phone to his wife, right? I just think it's more powerful to show less in a way, right? Or even to reveal that he has a family very late in the season rather than have her there the whole entire time. I don't know. This is just my preference, I think. But a couple of points you brought up that I think are absolutely true. The suspense in this show works really well. They do a really good job with that. And the action scenes, like the car crash is fantastic. Like the action is always good, spot on here. So it's more the character motivations and some of like just getting from one scene to another that seems not the strong suit for the series.
Yeah, I agree. When he did actually have to kill the couple, I mean, maybe he was always going to kill them, maybe.
Yeah.
But maybe he was going to we don't know. He's let people go before. But when he actually killed them, I mean, it really hurt him. And you could feel that. And you could feel just the senseless loss of life of these two people just enjoying their retirement. Yeah, hideous.
And that's where the showing less in some ways works for me. I just thought of this now, especially because I just watched the premiere episode of the new Dexter Original Sin, which was, in my opinion, terrible. Sona actually kind of liked it. I didn't like it, but I'm still curious.
I did watch that.
You did? I'm still curious to follow through with it, although I thought it was a terrible episode of television in general. The reason I bring that up is because there was something really powerful about Dexter at his best when he is befriending someone or he's trying to make a friend, basically, and this person's going to end up dead before the end of the season, and how Dexter himself feels bad about this inevitability. And I think, once again, knowing less about the Jackal, his biography, would make that, I like the ambiguity, basically, in general. I would prefer that rather than, I'd like this kinder, gentler version of the Jackal. It just doesn't make sense for me for him to be both things. But I would like to have seen exactly what you're describing, just him in the car and thinking like, well, maybe this time I won't have to kill them. And us just knowing he's in denial once again that this is going to happen. It's like the Rasmus situation once again, right?
Yeah, that's right. And maybe he wasn't going to kill them until that elderly guy said, I'm not dumb. I'm not dumb. You're going to have to get rid of us. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay, you're right.
Well, she also stabs him. That kind of accelerated
Ouch.
things.
Oh, that hurt.
Yeah, she could have actually killed him, right? If she had just known what she was doing. He did turn his back on them literally. So,
Yes. What's he doing that for? Silly.
yeah.
Come on.
They're just a nice couple of people. Like, hey, they don't want to die. When people don't want to die, they'll do about anything.
Oh, yeah. We can talk about Dexter another time.
But yes, we'll have to. As a matter of fact, I think I had a pretty negative take on the beginning of the series. I might, before I publish anything, I'll probably wait till a little bit later in the season.
Well, I loved that episode. I thought it was hilarious. I haven't
very
seen
funny,
Dexter in
very funny,
10 plus years, and I thought it was very nostalgic. It was great, but it didn't make me want to watch the next one. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, this is a digression, but I do agree that I thought it was terrible, but it was like I laughed out loud multiple times. I'm not sure that was the intention, but I did. But it was entertaining to watch in that way. And I am curious to see, like, what are they going to do next? He's obviously going to jump through time. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see how that all plays out.
Okay. Yep. Sorry for the digression.
That's okay. It's okay. So back out. Where are we here now? The show, rather cruelly, considering how things turn out, show us Bianca at home, reconciling with her husband, reconciling with her daughters. It's like, oh man, why are we even spending this time with the family, knowing how things are going to turn out? And then, like we mentioned before, Isabel shows up to tell her, look, you're not even officially quit yet, but actually, we do want you to pursue this lead. Only you have to do it off the books. And you have to make sure the Jackal dies, no questions asked. And man, like, this has red flags all over it. She should not be taking this offer at all.
And she says no. And I really liked
yes.
When she said no, I was like, great, something a bit different.
Exactly.
Awesome. No, you're not going. But we know you are eventually. And her husband definitely knows that she is going to take it, and he's just waiting for her to admit it to herself. And he kind of says, just pull the Band-Aid off quickly. Don't draw it out.
Right.
It's a little bit heartbreaking because you see the daughter kind of going, oh, yeah, that's great, Mum. You're not going to go.
Yeah, exactly.
And then she turns and she's like, well, what would happen if I did go? And it's heartbreaking.
And she knows this is all a setup. She texted Ossie. We see that at the end of the episode, right? And she still goes. And it's a terrible decision on her part. Really terrible decision.
Yeah, it hurts. And it came home when she texts her daughter. I think she texts her daughter first, or her daughter texts her, I love you, Mum.
Yes.
I love you too, Jasmine. And you just know when people do that in TV shows or movies.
Exactly. That's the part that's almost cruel, because they were kind of estranged. They could have left them that way, at least. Exactly like you said. We don't see Bianca write the text, but we see the daughter receive it, where she's like, I love you, baby girl. I'll see you soon. It's like, no, you're not. You're not going to see her at all.
We knew it was going to happen, but once that happened, it hits home. And that's the work that they've been doing all series about this family and the families. I think this one actually did work. Bianca's finally got her husband back in the house and her daughter's back in the house. It did work, yeah. I
would have preferred, once again, just my taste. Imagine she had actually quit, and now we see her at home. She's not working for MI6 anymore. She's finally out. We see what Jackal's doing. He's still trying to escape. She's trying to put it behind her. And then she's just like, okay, just one more mission, right? We feel the weight of that, like going like, oh no, this is just not going to go well. It just happens over the course of like 10 minutes. It should hurt more in a way. And it doesn't really have that effect, I don't think. But yeah, my theory is that this was maybe production delays and might explain some of these inconsistencies.
We'll go with that. and we'll say season 2 is going to be, much more thought out.
I hope so, yeah. Oh, so then Nuria gets that call from Jackal, where he's crying on the phone. She's testing him, like you mentioned. He's like, we can go anywhere. She's like, I want to stay home. I want to be nearby my family. I want to be here. I don't want to go anywhere. And he keeps saying, well, we can't do that. So she's like, okay, if we can't stay here, then they're coming for us here. I'm leaving. She doesn't tell him this. Obviously, she tells him nothing, because she doesn't want him on her tail as well. Although he'll probably be able to find them. What all remains to be seen in season 2.
She looked stunning in that high-necked sweater as well, that grey sweater. She just looked absolutely beautiful.
You have a crush on this woman. Have you seen oh, what's that Netflix show that she was in?
I don't think I've
Money.
seen her in anything before. I'll have to
It's
search
very
something
popular.
out.
Money Heist.
I don't think I did. No, it rings a bell though.
Yeah, Money Heist is like probably one of the 10 biggest series. It's a Spanish show.
Oh, yep,
And
yep.
anyway, she's in the entire thing. So hey, if you want to see a lot more of her, you should check that out. I
I'll
know
know
you're
what I'm
gonna start
watching
watching.
next week.
You're gonna start binging it tonight.
I thought there was some really cool. So after this scene, then the Jackal starts moving through the airport. I think Bianca starts moving through the airport as well. There's some really cool soundtrack
Yes.
work.
Hmm.
It's like a little bit electronic music, and it's moving forward, and he's dropping the gun in the bin, and he's searching for which passport he's going to use, and he's sending his bag somewhere else. I tried to Shazam the music, but I think it's original music for the show.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool. I really like that.
In the midst of all this, as you mentioned, you have these multiple people moving through airports, right? You have him arriving. A big question mark I have, by the way, that this guy's showing up. He's seen his face multiple times, with the car wreck and the drone. He's not wearing makeup anymore. There is that sketch of him out there. Obviously, after UDC's actual murder, this might be the number one story in the world. And he just walks into the airport. No one's even checking for his face anymore. All of that again is very hand wavy, and how that just suddenly they go from like being able to spot him easily from this sketch to now he's just disappeared and no one's looking anymore. It seems like everybody just moved on.
Yeah, now that you mention that, it does. I also wanted to see how he crossed borders as well.
Yeah,
There was big things about, oh, we're going to cross it into Montenegro here, but you can take this road, and yeah, it just moved too quickly.
I assume this that when he needed to get to Montenegro, I think that I've actually saw this in like a Reddit thread where someone was complaining about some of the plot holes here. That it's like, how the hell did he get on that bird watching tour? Didn't anyone just like let him get on? I am assuming that he needed to get there because he probably had booked the tour and he had the tickets ahead of time. So it's not like he just jumped into the bus going, "Hey, me too." I think like it was pre-planned, right? So that he looked legitimate with the passport and everything as expected. And I think that's why he needed to arrive there. So I don't really critique that particular point, more so that, hey, there's this English guy that everyone's looking for, and he just happens to be this English guy on our tour or at the airport or where, I mean, it just seems very hand wavy once again, that it's just like they're not thinking about how he would do this underground. He's just doing it in the open and no one's looking for him anymore. I just don't understand.
Mm. He did. There was a shot of him looking at one bird in the distance, and then
He does like birds.
all of a sudden he's on the bird tour. So it was like, oh,
Right.
that's right. He was into birds right at the beginning when he met Xenia at that bird watching place. Yeah, so that finally comes back in. He must have a
Right.
bit of a history, and he sketches the birds as well. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. And he has that PTSD trigger by birds as well.
of course. Oh yes, for sure.
Birds everywhere. It should be called like not the jackal, but like the the vulture. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kind of glossed over all of this, but I do like Bianca showing up with her partner. They are obviously suspicious of what's happened there. I do once again just another just bizarre plotting simplification or something, that when she goes to the Spanish police officer and butts up immediately against this woman, where I thought their dynamic was interesting, where he has to like take the lead to smooth over the feathers there of this miscommunication. But just the fact that they're saying, yeah, we decided he wasn't involved with it. Her husband's really rich. I don't know what he does for work. He's this English guy who lives in like the most ostentatious palace in this area. And it's just like, isn't this all red flags once again? Is what kind of investigators are these people that are not connecting these dots?
Yeah, it was so good. She was so casual. She was
Yeah,
more concerned about her coffee.
yeah, absolutely. This is not important. The British guy who looks like that sketch that lives in the giant house that I don't know how he makes his money. Why is any of this suspicious? What are you asking me these questions for?
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, and then they camp out at the mansion. We
Yeah,
knew it was going
exactly.
to end at the mansion. We knew there was going to be some showdown, and the taxi pulls up, and is anybody going to get out? No, Nuri is leaving.
Yeah, when we see this taxi pull up immediately, we're like, oh my God, he's arriving. And it's like, no, that's not what's happening at all. In the meantime, by the way, Xena has reached out to, or Zina, whatever her name is, has reached out to Jackal and warned him that they know you're in Cadiz. She also is wary that they're after her. She's been waiting in the lounge downstairs for people to show up, asking for her room number. And as soon as she sees that happen, she makes her escape and disposes of her phone, of course, which I'm sure they're tracking.
Yeah, that was cool that she let him know, gave him a heads up. Maybe she has a little bit of an affinity with him. That they're
I think she also wants him for her revenger, right?
Right. Okay. So she wants to use him. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And they have some camaraderie. I mean, she's going to be on the lam, and this guy's going to be better at it than anybody else, right?
That's right.
A little hand wavy yet again when they're like, should we follow her? He asks a very good question. What if she's going to the airport first? No, she's not driving her own car. She's not driving her own car. She can't be going to the airport. I'm like, I don't drive my own car to the airport. I take an Uber.
Yeah, I did think that. I was like, oh, obviously. Well, hang on a second.
Exactly. Wait a second. She said it very confidently. She goes, no.
Yes, she did.
She's running away. She's in a taxi. Yeah. When I go to the airport, I just abandon my car. I mean, of course, you can pay for parking, but no one pays for parking for 2 weeks. It's like $1,000.
Oh, Bianca. Yeah, she makes a few wrong moves and then she just throws her partner under the bus. She's like, so we're not going to kill the Jackal. I'm going to take him.
No, another terrible decision. Yes.
Poor old mate. He's been at her side the whole time and she's just going to put him in ultimate peril.
Yeah, both of them are definitely overconfident there. And then, I mean, there's like 20 minutes of the episode left at this point, and almost 10 minutes of it are spent on this cat and mouse inside the house itself, where they're triggering the alarms and they don't know where he is. This scene shouldn't really work because it's cat and mouse, but he's mostly just sitting inside of his panic room. It actually is really cool. Some of the visuals here are awesome. I love seeing her in red through the two-way mirror and how they're like superimposed on each other. So some of the visuals very cleverly done.
That was the money shot there. That was just absolutely stunning, wasn't it?
Beautiful work. And once again, the execution of most of this is really well done. This director who really just does a lot of UK TV series and procedurals, not like a flashy Hollywood director, but the action excellently executed, the suspense always good, even when the rationale seems to not really make sense. And then like just some of the visual flourishes are really beautifully done. Like I said, my critique is always like just moving from one scene to another. And I think I mentioned this, but I was surprised to see that it's the same writer for the entire series, because there's a real lack of quality, I think, from connecting the dots in episode 1 and 2 versus later episodes. And you need a writer's room, I think, right? You just like tell somebody, hey, solve all these problems. Like, I can't make these scenes fit together. Hand it off to another writer and let them work it out, right? Like, I don't know why it feels so rushed here at the end.
Yeah, it really bothers you, doesn't it?
It really does. Yes, it really does. This is the type of thing that really does bother me, because I feel like, and this really bothers me with movies oftentimes, if you had just polished the script, you really would have had a really good movie, and you just are not paying attention to some of the logistics here. It bothers me, as you can tell.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's a fair call. I loved it when they're in the house. You can see where all the shots are coming from. There's not just random gunfights. You know which corners of the room the people are, and then when the brother-in-law walks in, he pulls out his gun that he's stolen from Charles a few episodes ago. You can see the angles of the shots, and you can see where the danger is. And I really think those types of action elements that come together make the scene for me.
Yeah. It's really well executed once they're in that room, just like that. I always like that kind of Mexican standoff situation anyway. And as you mentioned, it's very clear. It's not like just random guns going off and then people drop dead and you're like, what happened? Yeah, and they take their time with this sequence, and it pays off because I think it's very clear. And some of those visuals, like I mentioned, are really sharp.
And it's just brutal. And her offsider saves her, and then he just drops and he's done. Yeah. I was like, wow, the bullet actually got him, and he's all done over. There's no dying scene, and the similar thing happens with Bianca as well when she calls out the name Duggan, and then he just flanks her.
Yeah, she says this doesn't have to end this way, and he shoots her and says, "Yes, it does. Yes, indeed, it does."
Wow, so cool. Sorry, as much as I love and dislike Bianca as a character, to see her die or to see something of consequence happen at the end of this series, you needed it. I needed it, and yeah, it was brutal and final. She's gone.
And then Jackal's making his escape. Speaking of when he's in that panic room and he's clearing things out and packing up his bag to go, Nuria left him way too much cash in there. I assume he's got to have crypto accounts all over the world, so he probably doesn't need that much cash. But there was a lot of cash left over. She seems to have left most of it behind. But anyway, he takes it with him before he leaves.
Every time that drawer gets opened, it's always full of cash.
It's always full.
Takes some, he takes some. It just replenishes.
It could be was a magic drawer with guns and with cash. Yeah, so he's leaving her that voicemail as he exits. She has disposed of the phone. She's at the airport. Once again, everybody in and out of airports in these sequences here towards the end of the episode. He leaves her that voicemail. It's an interesting dynamic there in the voicemail he's leaving because he's like yearning for her. And then he's kind of threatening her, being like, I need you. I'll find you. So it's like, okay, well, I'm not sure that's the way you should message that. But
yeah, that wasn't nice at all, was it? No.
Exactly. And then we see in the rearview mirror the cleanup crew. So even if Bianca had succeeded, she may very well have been killed as she exited the building because the cleanup crew is hot in pursuit, racing up behind him. And but he seems to be hit from the side. So I don't know if this is just a coincidental collision or if this is just part of this cleanup crew that is, one's waiting at the bottom of the mountain, one at the top of the hill to corner him. And he had another car accident and we fade to black, but he survives the crash.
Okay, so that was, I assume that was like Charles Dance's, like the cabal coming after him, but that makes more sense that that's the cleanup.
Yeah, I think it's part of when, I don't think Charles Dance ever says this explicitly, but when Whitlock mentions, hey, why don't we send her to kill him and then we'll worry about her after, I assumed that they were basically tracking her the whole time. So however things played out, they were there to clean up.
Yeah, and another car accident.
Yes,
two in one episode. Okay, right. All right.
This one inside the car.
Yeah. But we don't see the result of it. We don't see what happens. Again, another thing that we don't see. We didn't see the boat. Right. We don't see the car. Another one.
Darren, do you think that bothered me?
I think it did. It bothered me too.
Yes, good. I was just thinking I just saw a really bad car accident, something I realized it was Carry On. It was a horrible car accident in that movie, like just badly done, I would say.
Oh, wow. That was cool.
I mean, the CGI was corny, but I think intentionally so. We could talk about that. That movie is very tongue in cheek, so we'll talk about that. Anyway, before we get to the very last scenes here, we have Ossie back at MI5 talking to Isabel. She's gotten her promotion, of course. But of course, we see that he had gotten that text message from Bianca, so he knew something was amiss for sure. He deletes it, but of course, that's not how text messages disappear, so there's still evidence of it regardless. I don't know if he's trying to cover his tracks or if he's going to pursue this. I assume if this actor comes back for season 2, if there's a big enough part for him, that he would potentially be pursuing this, what happened to her.
Yeah. He had a pained look on his face when he deleted that text message. So it was cool. I liked him. And I do think he will come back. You wouldn't waste an actor like that. Yeah, he's a pretty big star in England too. I mean, he was the villain in the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie. So he's not a no-name here for sure. I don't remember him in that movie, but was he under makeup or something? Yes, he's the guy who has the like they had the skin stretched over his face. Right. Okay. He's not very recognizable. Very, very good actor. Very, very cool. Yeah, and apparently he's been in a bunch of TV in England, so probably pretty famous there. Isabel at least doesn't have to pretend she cares about plants anymore, throws them in the garbage. Yep. Right. It's just like she treats her agents. Yes, right in the trash when they're inconvenient. And then Jackal meets with Xena in Budapest. Beautiful, Budapest. I got to go see. That's another one for my bucket list.
He shows up dressed like a beat up Italian waiter, according to Xena. Once again, I got to tell you, no one's looking for the Jackal anymore. I'm not sure why they wouldn't be looking for him in Budapest, but I don't know. This guy's just walking around.
Just a different hairstyle, different
he
shades.
combed his hair differently, of course.
Yeah,
the glasses. That's all you need.
Leather jacket, and no one can recognize him.
Exactly. As we saw from the manhunt around the assassination here, the CEO in it's all you got to do. Put some glasses on every once in a while. No one can track you. That's ironic, of course. Yeah, and then Xena mentions the magazine to him, says, she asks him, first of all, of course, how did you survive that car crash? No, nobody knows how to solve that, so we're not going to find out. Maybe by season 2 we'll have a flashback because and they'll figure it out and they'll have worked it out.
I hope so. Yeah.
I do need them to do a flashback and fill in these gaps if they want to be a little more thorough in season 2. And that old Jackal magic, he's the Wolverine or whatever he is. He's regenerating all the time and survived. And she shows him the newspaper, says, well, here's the guy you want to get. But he says, well, I'll be right on that. But first, I have someone else I need to find. So good luck, Mr. Jackal. Good luck. And that's the end of the season.
That's the end. That's it. Is that Nuria that he has to find? It's not Gary?
Maybe it is Gary. I need my backup. I obviously need backup here. I'm a mess without him. No, I'm pretty sure he's looking for Nuria.
Okay, that's the end. Yeah, there was a great song. I had to Shazam the song at the end. What's done in the dark must come to light. Very, very cool lyrics over the closing credits and the scenic shot of Budapest. Yeah, that looks an incredible city. And I mean, I enjoyed it, but I had a lot of misgivings in that episode as well. Yeah. But I'll be right there for the start of the next season.
Yeah, I would be on board for season 2 for the action, and because I am generously reading that the messiness here at the end was some kind of rush job for some reason, some production issues, my assumption. And this is a pretty big hit, so they'll spend more money. And I'm sure, I mean, you just go on Reddit, and there are people who are nitpicking way more than I am. So hopefully they'll read that and be like, oh, let's try to fix some of these things in season 2. All I need is a flashback that shows me, you know what? Just show me how he got from the boat into the car. Just show me that, please, at least.
Well, I don't think we're going to see that. And we might not even see how he got out of that car crash at the end.
I think they have to show. I mean, when they acknowledge it, where she's like, "How did you do that?" They can't believe it like that. Just be like magic. Like there's got to be some explanation somehow.
Well, that will be a great way to start the next season.
I think that
would be
into
it.
I think if they're smart, they would go right into a flashback, and we would see everything that led up, how he survived it, how he escaped, how he plotted his revenge. Like I want to see that. You know, like maybe he reaches out to Gary. Maybe Xena is putting things in motion as well. Like, I'd love to see that as kind of like a cold open to the series. Like, all that's in episode 1. That would be great. I don't know if we'll see that or not. We'll see.
Yeah, wicked. Okay. Good season of television.
Yeah. I enjoyed most of this. As you could probably tell from from these recaps, since we watched a week to week, that, I became more and more skeptical. I was saying episode 8 filled in so many of these kind of psychological gaps that I felt the show had in the middle, that I'm like, episode 8, I was very high on it. I'm like, this is my favorite episode of the season. And then the last 2 episodes, I'm like, hold on a second, what happened here? It filled in a couple of holes and created 25 new ones. Okay, a few questions for you here at the end. Is Bianca dead? For real? You sure?
Yes, she's dead. Gotta be.
I agree, but I always feel like, for example, her partner gets shot in the head. She did not get shot in the head. Was she wearing a bulletproof vest? Did the cleanup crew come and fake her death so that she can be in season 2? I'm not actually believing that, but I always feel like until you see someone dead, they're not dead.
Okay, and I think that actress's name is on the credits as a producer.
Yes, Lashana Lynch.
Okay, all right.
All right, Darren. Thanks again for the conversation. I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, Victor. Thank you.